Ladies and gentlemen, the world leaders are in panic, not because they didn't expect a response, but because the response shattered their expectations. Iran didn't whisper, it roared. It didn't blink, it burned. It wasn't a symbolic gesture, it was a statement, wrapped in fire, written in conviction, sealed with sacrifice. Iran's retaliation was far more than the launching of missiles or the deployment of military force. It was a calculated message wrapped in fire. It was the voice of a nation that had long been portrayed as isolated, cornered, and weakened. But when the retaliation came, it didn't come as a whisper of resistance. It came as a storm of assertion. Iran wasn't simply responding to a military provocation. It was speaking to the world in the only language the oppressors seemed willing to hear: strength. This was not a routine exchange of fire. It was a statement sent across borders, through the skies, across the desks of presidents and prime ministers, declaring that Iran is no longer willing to be boxed in by fear, sanctions, or intimidation. This retaliation echoed far beyond the battlefield. It sent a signal to allies and enemies alike. To its adversaries, it was a warning. We are capable, we are prepared, we will not be silenced. To the Muslim world, it was a call. Stand up, wake up. We don't have to bow anymore. To the global public, it was a challenge to the narrative that has dominated headlines for years. Iran refused to play the role of the quiet victim. It rose with a strategic force that shattered assumptions and forced world leaders to reevaluate their positions. The retaliation also carried emotional and spiritual weight. It was not just about reclaiming military honor. It was about restoring dignity. Every explosion, every target hit was symbolic of a people saying, we bleed, but we are not broken. It reminded the world that retaliation, when backed by a cause greater than conquest, when backed by suffering, sacrifice, and faith, can become a mirror that exposes the injustice of the aggressor. This wasn't about revenge. It was about revelation. It revealed the imbalance, the arrogance of power, and the resilience of the oppressed. Moreover, it disrupted the carefully crafted illusion that one side held all the cards. The military move had global implications, but its real impact was psychological. It rattled confidence. It shifted conversations. It brought hesitation to decision rooms that once operated with unchecked boldness. Iran's message wasn't just directed at Israel. It was meant for every leader who thought resistance could be crushed under bombs and diplomacy. It was proof that when people are driven by something higher than fear, by faith, by legacy, by a cry for justice, they will always find a way to be heard. Oppression builds pressure that eventually erupts because human dignity has a threshold. When people are silenced, suppressed, and stripped of their rights over time, a slow-burning fire begins to grow beneath the surface. It's not loud at first. It doesn't make headlines. It simmers in the hearts of the unheard, the unseen, and the broken. The world may look away, assuming silence means peace. But in reality, silence can be the sound of restraint holding back an inevitable storm. Oppression is not just about violence or war. It's about the psychological and spiritual chains placed on individuals and nations. It's when voices are choked by fear, when freedom is a distant dream, and when hope is attacked at its roots. As this kind of pain and injustice continues, it creates an emotional and moral weight that can no longer be carried. The pressure doesn't vanish. It multiplies with every injustice committed, with every child buried, with every prayer said, under a sky lit by missiles. It builds when people see their cries ignored, their wounds mocked, and their futures stolen. It's like trying to hold down a volcano with bare hands. Eventually, something gives way. And when it does, the world doesn't just hear it, it feels it. The eruption comes with force, with fury, and with the full weight of all the suffering that was bottled up for years. This eruption isn't always predictable. It doesn't follow polite timelines or obey diplomatic rules. It comes suddenly, unexpectedly, because pain has no calendar. It doesn't care about international relations or economic agreements. What it does care about is truth, justice, and the soul of a people who have had enough. The longer the world suppresses the cries of the oppressed, the more intense the eruption becomes when it finally arrives. It's not just a physical retaliation, it's emotional, spiritual, and generational. The world often acts shocked when retaliation happens, but it shouldn't be. When oppression continues unchecked, when the balance of justice is tilted by greed and arrogance, an eruption becomes not just likely, it becomes inevitable. It's the voice of the oppressed finally breaking through the noise of the powerful. It's the breaking of chains, not with words, but with action. And when it happens, it shakes not just the ground where the oppressed stand. It shakes the foundations of every system that allowed the oppression to happen in the first place. The world has always had a way of underestimating those it labels as weak. History is filled with empires and powers that dismissed the cries of the oppressed, believing that because they were quiet, they were incapable. Because they lacked weapons, they lacked strength. Because they prayed instead of protested, they posed no threat. But time and time again, the world has been proven wrong. The power of the oppressed is not found in how loud they shout or how many soldiers they command. Their power lies in endurance, in the quiet resolve that builds in the shadows, and in the unbreakable spirit that refuses to be crushed. When nations are stepped on, when people are humiliated, when communities are dehumanized, something sacred begins to grow within them: resilience. And that resilience doesn't vanish. It grows stronger in silence. It matures in patience. It evolves in hardship. The world often sees oppressed people as broken, but what it fails to see is that broken people can be the most dangerous when they heal with purpose. The oppressed don't seek conflict for the sake of it. They wait, they endure, and they rise only when they have no choice left. And when they do, their force is not fueled by arrogance. It's powered by conviction. The oppressed understand pain better than anyone. They've lived in its shadows, learned its language, and survived its attacks. So when they retaliate, they do so with a clarity that is born not from strategy alone, but from necessity. The world underestimated Iran's will, its faith, its patience, and most of all, its memory. The memory of betrayal, of sanctions, of being isolated and demonized, and that memory fueled a response far greater than what anyone expected. This is not new. From Palestine to South Africa, from Vietnam to Algeria, the oppressor has always believed that those without power would remain powerless. But the oppressed are not weak. They are waiting for the moment when the scales of justice tilt just enough to act. And when they do, the shift is seismic. The world was caught off guard, not because Iran became powerful overnight, but because it forgot that true power doesn't always look like wealth or weapons. Sometimes true power looks like restraint. It looks like resolve. It looks like the faith of a mother who teaches her child to stand firm even while bombs fall outside. That kind of power is invisible to those who worship dominance, but unstoppable to those who walk with purpose. Purpose is the invisible fire that burns long after fear has faded. Fear is temporary. It shows up quickly, shakes you, paralyzes you, and demands retreat. But purpose is different. Purpose doesn't shake, it steadies. It doesn't paralyze, it empowers. When a person or a nation acts from fear, they react. They calculate, hesitate, and make decisions rooted in survival. But when driven by purpose, that same person or nation moves with clarity, boldness, and unshakable intent. Fear says, protect yourself. Purpose says, stand for something greater than yourself. That's the difference. One is about self-preservation. The other is about self-sacrifice for a mission that echoes beyond personal gain. When you look at the great moments in history, the ones that changed the direction of nations or shifted the global conversation, they were rarely driven by those who acted in fear. They were led by people who had a deep conviction, a calling, a burden, a fire in their bones. Purpose doesn't rely on numbers or polls or popularity. Purpose walks into the storm knowing full well the cost, but still choosing to go forward. Fear avoids risk. Purpose embraces it, not because it's foolish, but because it sees something more important than safety: impact. When Iran retaliated, it wasn't just an act of defense. It was a display of purpose. They weren't merely reacting to an attack. They were expressing the deeper cry of a people who had carried pain and injustice for years. That kind of action doesn't come from fear. It comes from a place deeper than logic. It comes from identity. Fear wants comfort. Purpose demands discomfort. Fear whispers, what if I fail? Purpose shouts, what if I don't try? And when a movement, a nation, or even a single voice chooses purpose over fear, the outcome is no longer limited to circumstances. It becomes connected to destiny. Those who move in purpose don't need the whole world to agree with them. They just need to know why they're doing what they're doing. That why becomes their armor. It protects them from doubt, from distraction, and from the noise of critics. Because when your why is strong enough, your how will find its way. Fear always looks at consequences. Purpose looks at consequences too, but not just for themselves, for everyone involved. Purpose-driven people think generationally. They think spiritually. They think beyond headlines and elections and into the legacy they are shaping with their actions. That's why purpose always outlasts fear. Fear may have the first word, but purpose always has the last. What we're witnessing today is not just a clash between two nations. It's a confrontation between truth and falsehood. The surface of the conflict may involve borders, military strategy, political alliances, and economic interests, but underneath it all lies a deeper spiritual and moral divide. It's a divide between those who manipulate power to control narratives and those who rise to challenge that manipulation with conviction and courage. This is a war of perception, where one side owns the media and the message, while the other side owns the pain and the principle. One side crafts the headlines. The other side carries the bodies. One side builds walls of propaganda. The other builds graves of martyrs. Truth in today's world is dangerous because it exposes systems. It tears the mask off injustice. It refuses to let powerful nations hide behind polished press conferences and carefully written speeches. Falsehood, on the other hand, is dressed in suits, diplomacy, and strategic ambiguity. It knows how to spin every bomb as a defense, every sanction as a necessity, and every lie as a misunderstood truth. That's why this conflict transcends geography. It's no longer about one land or one people. It's about the moral compass of the entire world. Truth is not always loud. It doesn't always come from the ones with the most reach. Sometimes it comes from the voiceless. Sometimes it cries out from under rubble. Sometimes it bleeds in silence. But make no mistake, even if truth is buried, it is never dead. It keeps rising in the actions of the brave, in the prayers of the grieving, and in the unwavering eyes of the oppressed who refuse to forget. Falsehood has the backing of empires, but truth has the weight of heaven. That's why this battle is shaking the globe. It's not just politics, it's prophecy. It's the eternal confrontation between the powerful who rewrite history and the powerless who live through it. And when the powerful get nervous, when their lies begin to unravel, they panic because deep down they know that truth doesn't need to be defended, it just needs to be spoken. And when it is, it shakes palaces and awakens the sleeping. This is why the world is uneasy. It's not just about retaliation or strategy. It's about the terrifying realization that a voice once ignored is now echoing through every corner of the earth. The flags may say it's about nations, but the heavens know it's about something far deeper. In moments of global crisis, neutrality is not just silence, it's complicity. When injustice fills the streets, shakes cities, and takes lives, standing on the sidelines is not a position of peace. It's a quiet surrender to evil. Every person is faced with a decision, to be a spectator or to be a voice. A spectator watches pain unfold and feels bad for a moment, maybe posts something safe and politically correct, then moves on. A voice, however, refuses to let the cries of the oppressed be drowned out by convenience, fear, doubting, buy property, convenience, or comfort. The world doesn't just need more eyes watching, it needs more mouths speaking, more hearts burning, more souls awakened to truth. Being a spectator might seem harmless. It might feel like avoiding conflict, but in reality, it's a subtle alliance with the aggressor. Spectators don't challenge the system, they enable it. They allow bombs to fall while they scroll. They let lies spread while they stay silent. They let children die in Gaza, in Yemen, in Syria, while they go on with their lives as if nothing ever happened. But history doesn't remember spectators. It remembers the voices, the ones who stood in front of tanks, who raised signs, who prayed loudly, who marched into the fire not to be seen, but to make sure someone else could live. There's a cost to being a voice. You might lose followers. You might be misunderstood. You might be targeted. But the cost of being silent is much greater. Silence may protect your comfort, but it betrays your calling. Each of us was given a conscience, not to keep it quiet, but to let it guide us toward courage. The world is groaning under the weight of oppression, injustice, war, and deceit. And while governments and media twist the truth, it's the people, the everyday people, who must decide whether they will echo the lies or break them with boldness. The time for passivity is over. The illusion of neutrality is crumbling. Whether it's in conversation, on social media, in our communities, or in our prayers, everyone has a role. You don't have to be famous, powerful, or perfect to be a voice. You just have to be willing. The line has been drawn, not between countries or religions, but between conscience and cowardice. When you see bombs drop on innocent people, when you hear the weeping of mothers, when you see truth buried under propaganda, you are being asked a question, not by politicians, but by your own soul. Will you just watch, or will you speak?